Welcome to the Jason and Scot Show, your source for the latest news and trends in the e-commerce industry. Featuring host Jason Retailgeek Goldberg, SVP of Commerce at Razorfish, and Scot Wingo, founder and executive chairman of ChannelAdvisor. Here are Jason and Scot.
Welcome to the Jason and Scot Show. This is episode 212, being recorded live on Wednesday, March 18th, 2020. I'm your host, Jason Retailgeek Goldberg, and as usual, I'm here with your co-host, Scot Wingo.
Hey, Jason, and welcome back, Jason Scot Show listeners. We're excited to have you live. Jason, we've been working from home for a long time. It's getting pretty crazy. I know I talked to you earlier, and you and your son were doing some lightsaber battling as kind of a little break there, so that's exciting. And we thought it would be fun to do this live podcast. We've always kind of thought it'd be fun to experiment with the format and see what people like or don't like, so we're excited to try this out. So we have a live stream here, but obviously we'll be out in our normal audio only format later tomorrow. So we've got about 10 folks live, which is great. And so what we're going to do tonight is spend about 5 minutes on kind of our normal flow, and then kick it to you guys for any questions. If you want to kind of get in the queue for a question, go ahead and raise your hand. You should see at the bottom of the webinar window there, we have a different view than you do, but I think there's a little raise your hand thing. So go ahead and get in the queue, and we will kick it out to you in a couple minutes. So Jason, how are you doing? Are your Starbucks closed? At ours, we can still get mobile orders, but I think in bigger cities, everything's closed. Is that right?
No. My local Starbucks is open for to-go orders only. And it, again, it's a little bit of a shame. I've been trying to over-tip every time I go in there because they're not making any money, and I desperately need them to keep working. So a little bit self-benefiting generosity, but every single time they take cash, they have to wash their hands. So I'm mobile ordering, and then I go in and pick it up, and I want to give a big tip, and the user interface actually caps the tip you can get, which I never noticed before. You can't do a custom amount, which is sad.
I know they introduced a thing where they have a window so you can do it later. Like it used to have a really, you can only do it at the order. Now they've got a window.
But it's discrete values you can tip.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
No custom, huh?
Yeah, no. But I have augmented my Starbucks. I actually shifted from lattes to iced coffees in a vain effort to slightly improve my health. And I've got in my refrigerator right now about 10 gallons of Starbucks iced coffee.
Holy cow. All right, so you're stockpiling.
Yeah, exactly.
Other
people are hoarding toilet paper. I'm against that, but I am hoarding iced coffee. So if you're someone that couldn't get iced coffee in Chicago this week, I'm sorry.
So this reminds me, I've been meaning to ask you on the interwebs, but do you think, you're a big payments guy, do you think this virus is going to get rid of cash even faster and lend more towards digital payments? Right? Is there any data that you're seeing on that? Or
I do. I think there's a whole host of behaviors that are changing while we're in the middle of the pandemic. And I think there's a reasonable chance that many of those behaviors will stick post-pandemic, right? So maybe not to the same level, but I'm sort of writing a POV for a bunch of our clients right now. But one of the hypothesis is that the typical American consumer is going to be more germ phobic after this pandemic than they were before this pandemic. And that manifests itself in retail in a bunch of ways, but digital payments and touchless payments, may be preferred to handing your credit card to a clerk or handing cash or having your card, physically go through the machine. So I'm not sure that's going to be the hugest shift. But, the other thing that's happening is a lot of consumers are trying new methodologies for the first time ever. Their first curbside grocery pickup or their first order ahead for Starbucks. And many of those consumers will adopt that new behavior. So for both of those reasons, I think that the net is probably slightly favorable to the digital payment space.
Very cool. Awesome. So we wanted to just capture at the top of the show some news. So most people are aware that a lot of retailers have either closed or substantially cut back hours due to the COVID-19 virus. So we've got a little list here. So alphabetically, unless I say otherwise, these are all closed through March 27th. So we've got Abercrombie, Adidas, Allbirds, American Eagle, Apple, Away, Canada Goose, Casper, Chico's, Columbia Sportswear, Dick's Sporting Goods. They're limiting their hours. They're not closed. Foot Locker, Gap, Glossier, Hudson's Bay, H&M, JCPenney's, they're April 2nd. J. Crew, Kohl's on reduced hours. L Brands, Lego, that's a really sad one because if you're going to be stuck inside with kids, you really need some Legos. So that's you're going to have to go to Walmart or Target, I guess, for your Legos. Lululemon, Macy's, Neiman Marcus, Nike, Nordstrom, Patagonia. They actually closed their web operations. I don't know if you.
Yeah, they're about the only ones I know of that did that.
Yeah. Peloton, REI, Sephora, April 3rd, Ulta, 331, Under Armour, 328, Urban Outfitters, VF Corp, which is Vans and Timberland and others, and then Warby. So, and then to kind of cap it off, today Simon Properties announced they're closing all their malls. So that's pretty huge. And I don't know about what's the other one, Westfields? Have they announced closures?
I haven't seen another mall operator announce a fleet-wide closures. Individual properties have announced closures where that was mandated by the local municipality.
Yeah. So we're recording this on the 18th. This is 9 days away generally. On the 28th, 29th, do you think these stores are opening, or are we going to see this stretch into April?
So I'm not an expert in pandemics, but my sense is we are in for a pretty prolonged closure. So I don't think that we're going to expect to see these things open back up in April. Like every new thing that closes is announcing a later reopening date. And so, for example, the schools, like at first they're like, we're going to close for 2 weeks and reevaluate. And now they're all saying at a minimum, we're going to be closed through all of April. I'm now hearing, things close that aren't anticipating opening until sometime in May at the earliest. And it just doesn't seem likely to me that retail is going to reopen dramatically before a lot of these other shelter-in-place measures are lifted. So I'm terrified that we're in this thing for at least a sort of a 2-month disruption and potentially significantly longer.
Yeah, there's someone that had a kind of interesting idea that at first I thought was a joke, but imagine if stores could put like circles on the floor, kind of like paths, and they were all 10 feet away from each other, and you could kind of have a, going down an aisle, we're all going to go this way and be 10 feet away. Do you think we'll see some really weird changes like that to retail as this gets on?
We've already seen some interesting things on queuing, where customers have to be spaced, much further apart than we typically see for queuing. There are grocery stores that are saying one customer on the conveyor belt at a time. There are little things like that. If you're in a municipality that has a shelter-in-place order and that municipality doesn't define you as a critical service, and that's very controversial right now because the definition of what a critical service is wildly different from place to place. I doubt you're going to get away with just making some like more strict spacing rules and open early. Just doesn't seem plausible.
Cool. So let's kick it out to the live audience and raise your hand and let us know if you have a question. Jason, do you see anyone out there queuing for questions?
I am scanning, I think there's going to be some nerves about breaking the ice because nobody.
Well, we know Nicholas. Let's put Nicholas on the spot. He submitted a question. Maybe he'll ask it.
Nicholas, to warn you, you are unmuted. I don't know if you have an audio set up or not. We can read your question if you don't, but are you able to speak, Nicholas?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great. Bonjour.
Hey, bonjour. Good to see you guys. I was going to comment on Scott's giant microphone, by the way.
Thanks. Jason has microphone envy, but we're keeping this safe for the kids.
I like the video format. That's pretty cool. I'm a frequent listener to the podcast.
Let the record show I do have as big a mic as Scott. I'm not going to get into relative sizes.
Very nice. And yours is a cover too. That's very.
I just had it out of frame. Yeah, and I.
He spits a lot.
See, but mine's branded too, so there is that.
He expectorates quite a bit, so he needs a spit guard.
Exactly. That's called a pop filter.
I posted a question on your Facebook page. It was a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm sure people are wondering why the rush and on toilet paper across all the stores in America. And there's a lot of experts out there that have different theories on why that is the hot product right now. But I was wondering whether you had a theory.
Yeah, I have an opinion about everything. But Scott, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share?
I think it's a mass hysteria. I think once there's kind of the snowball effect that once you see someone with a cart full, you're like, I better go get some of that. So I kind of put it up to mass hysteria that there was some starting event. Now in my area, we're seeing it with milk, which doesn't make any sense. So you're seeing carts full of milk. I guess people, I read an article, it didn't make sense to me, but I guess people are freezing it. And then there's this one guy in Chicago that's evidently hoarding iced coffee. So I read an article about him as well.
It is interesting. Like there's kind of the rational and the irrational. I actually have several clients in the family care paper goods industry. And so one thing to know, there is no limited supply of toilet paper manufacturing capacity. Like toilet paper, unlike a lot of these other goods, is mostly made in the US. And there's voluminous manufacturing capacity. What's slightly unique about toilet paper is it's so inexpensive and it's so bulky that in normal times, it doesn't make sense to store a lot of prefabricated toilet paper. So the supply chain is pretty efficient. They mostly make it on demand and ship it right to the store. So when they had this run, the good news is, much more so than anything else, it's super easy to turn up the volume on the toilet paper production and get more in the chain, and a bunch of toilet paper is going to land on all the shelves of the retailers in the next week. So unlikely people are going to be in a bad situation with no toilet paper. It is bad for the retailers and the manufacturers, however, because the pandemic isn't going to cause anyone to use more toilet paper. So, there's some products that are selling better as a result of the pandemic, like cleaning products or alcohol, where our consumption is probably going way up. So their spike in sales is sort of a permanent, legitimate spike in sales. But in the case of toilet paper, what's happening is sales are just getting front loaded. Everyone's going to end up with a closet full of toilet paper. And after the pandemic, toilet paper sales are going to be very slow for a while as everyone burns through their inventory. So from a practical standpoint, that's sort of the situation. They're making a bunch more, unlikely to be a prolonged shortage, but not an awesome economic situation. From the irrational standpoint, one of the problems with the pandemic is there's very few active things we can do to help ourselves. Like there's not medications we can take. There's most of what we're being asked to do is very passive, and that feels disempowering. And so it's a normal human instinct that we want to do stuff proactively to take care of ourselves and our family. Getting an excess supply of toilet paper and other supplies has ended up being that proactive thing that people have felt like they could do. And in the case of toilet paper, more so than, say, milk, there's a very negative incentive to not having it. If you don't have milk, if you have kids, it's a potential serious situation, but you just don't drink milk. You don't have the option to just not go to the bathroom if you don't have toilet paper. And so people imagine that negative situation and it feels particularly painful. So you're more inclined to buy toilet paper. And then as Scott rightly pointed out, that situation snowballs because, the next set of panickers walk into the store and they see toilet paper in everyone's cart. So they put toilet paper in their cart. And then the third set of shoppers come in and they see the shelf is empty. So they start, going to places that no one shopped in 6 months, like Staples, and trying to buy toilet paper.
Yeah, once our restaurants closed they still do delivery, but there's this whole set of people. I would kind of say millennials, largely just in a broad spectrum, that don't really cook. So once the restaurants closed, and they're relatively cheap, so they don't like the delivery options, which are more expensive. Our fresh vegetables and ramen and kind of that college kind of stuff went really fast. So it was at first it was kind of toilet paper, sanitizer, cleaner. Then it was milk, and then now it's kind of the other parts of the grocery store. But there's still cauliflower. No one likes cauliflower.
Yeah, and vegan products. It's super funny.
Yeah, the vegan and organic
store,
stuff.
all the shelves are like all the dairy's completely wiped out, but in the middle of the dairy, there's one shelf that's completely full, and it's all the vegan cheeses.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions, Nicholas?
Well, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but and maybe you can go to another question. But what I'll put out there is it'll be you've talked a little bit about some of the products who might see their supply chains disrupted. Maybe you can expand on that later in the show around, do we think there will be massive disruptions to supply chains for core products, or do we think retailers are just adjusting in the short term and we'll get back to normal?
Let me kick a question to you. Are you in the Bay Area today?
I am. Yeah.
What's the shelter? So I think that's the only area really that has a shelter in place where you're not even allowed to leave until it's essentially an emergency. How has that changed people's behavior? Did people have enough food? And give us hopefully, we don't all get there, but we probably will. What's that like?
Yeah, so I've been telling this story this week. So Monday afternoon, I went out with one of my sons to get our haircut, because that was one of the places that was going to shut down. It's deemed non-essential. So we just went and did that. And we looked around at which stores, how stores were doing. We have a Safeway nearby, a grocery store, and that seemed to be going fine. And they were going to stay open, of course. But the longest lines going around the block were for the cannabis stores, because people were pretty convinced that they were going to get shut down. They did get shut down. So I guess people had time to load up on that. However, they got reopened because I guess now they're deemed to be an essential commodity. So I thought that was interesting. But in general, it's pretty quiet here. There's a bit of a ghost town downtown and all around the city. People, I think, are following the directives of staying home and keeping their movements to a minimum. So it's kind of an eerie feeling, and we're just a couple days in. The question is whether what does that look like a week out, 2 weeks out.
Very cool. Thanks for that. We'll get to your supply chain. Let's see if we have any other questions. Jason, I think Adam had a question.
Yeah, and I have unmuted Adam. So Adam, if you have audio, feel free to ask your question. Otherwise, send it to us via text, or I'm staring at it via text.
How are you guys? I just put the question in there about what do you think the implications are going to be for grocery retailers? I assume a lot of people right now are ordering maybe for the first time. Maybe some people are just doing it more than they used to. So we have a pretty elevated percentage of the population, most likely. Do you think people ultimately sort of go back to a level of online ordering and grocery similar to before, or have we just accelerated to 5 years ahead and that'll be a pretty sticky category?
Yeah, I'll take a first shot. Looks like Jason's unwinding a cable or something. I don't know what's going on.
Plugging in power to my laptop, 14%.
Uh-oh. Yep. Hey, Jason, don't forget to plug in the power on the laptop. Okay, there he goes. All right, so I'll take a shot at this. I think ideally this would create a new level where we get people to experience these kind of new on-demand services. What I worry about is I'm a heavy user of these things, and they've seriously degraded during this. They're not able to handle the demand. Food delivery has gotten worse. I'm a big Instacart user, and they've got windows out. I was trying to get some stuff from like Costco. That's just my go-to for Instacart. And I'm looking at delivery windows next Wednesday. At Prime Now, I can't even order anything on Prime Now in my area because all the delivery windows are gone. So, that my concern is we're going to see this huge demand, and then people are going to have a bad experience because the supply just isn't keeping up as fast as this spike in demand. But if this, the odd thing is if this goes on long enough, those things will balance out. That as retail, for example, lays off workers, there'll be more delivery kind of people, and then I think that'll balance out and the user experience will get better. So there's this weird inverse correlation I would predict of the longer this goes on, the better it will be for on-demand experiences. But at the same time, none of us wants it to go on a long time. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think you'd way rather be a grocery retailer than a lot of other categories of retail. Because I don't think this is going to be a good situation for anyone, but I feel like there's more silver linings for grocery than a lot of other retail. So, so first of all, you're not going to have the same revenue disruption, right? Like if you're Abercrombie and Fitch or JCPenney, like you're facing the prospect of having zero revenue for the next 2 to 3 months, right? Which is going to be economically devastating. Even in China at its worst, the grocery stores never closed. So good news, the grocery stores are going to continue to get some revenue. As you sort of implied in your question, Adam, this pandemic is spawning a lot more trials of digital grocery than we ever had before. So, we were projecting digital grocery was going to grow pretty rapidly anyway. It's now going to grow much more rapidly because a lot more users got forced into their first trial, and that behavior is likely to stick with a bunch of those new consumers. It's a mixed bag, however, because as Scott pointed out, service levels are at an all-time low. So you're getting a bunch of customers to do their first trial and the experience kind of sucks. But I have a feeling a lot of consumers are going to cut retailers a lot of slack. I think it's a little bit like the dancing bear. The magic is they can get groceries delivered at all, not that the groceries get delivered as reliably and promptly as consumers would expect under normal circumstances. But here's an unfortunate thing. If you're Walmart or Kroger and there's a customer of yours that's been shopping in your store and they're going to switch to digital grossing, and there's a risk that test is going to be with Amazon, Walmart or Kroger would desperately rather you try them than try Amazon, right? So they're fighting really hard to win digital consumers for grocery that already have an inclination to switch to digital. But they don't really want their core shoppers to switch to digital because at the moment, those digital grocery orders are way less profitable than an in-store grocery order. And so the fact that the whole world is now accelerating their use of digital grocery is going to be economically challenging for grocery. Again, better situation that they're switching to a slightly less profitable version of your service than that they're abandoning your service altogether. So I do think grocery is better off than apparel or department stores. But it is creating new opportunities and new challenges for grocers. And I guess the one other thing I would point out, all grocers were piloting these programs for what I call micro fulfillment centers, which are these sort of automated robotic systems. They store all the goods. When a customer places an online order, the robot aggregates that order and gets it ready to be, curbside pickup or delivered. And that is about 1/10 the cost of paying a person to run around the store picking that order. And so these micro fulfillment centers are an important way that digital grocers could be profitable at scale. So I have a feeling that this accelerated pivot to digital grocery is going to accelerate grocers' investment in micro fulfillment centers. And I think there's another bonus. I think this post-pandemic consumer that's going to be more germophobic is probably going to like the fact that the bag of cashews that you get from the micro fulfillment center wasn't available to be handled by 100 other customers in that grocery store. So I actually think from a germophobic standpoint, consumers may have a slight preference for these micro fulfillment centers. So for both of those reasons, I think we're going to see post-pandemic grocery have to make a bigger investment in these micro fulfillment centers. And the fact that we now know Amazon's new grocery store in LA is intended to have a micro fulfillment center, anything Amazon does appropriately puts the fear of God in all the other retailers and accelerates investment. So I think for all those reasons, that's a likely outcome of this whole deal.
Cool. Adam, thanks for the question. I see you have another one. We'll circle back around to you. Jason, we've got Joshua is next, and then after him, we have Jamie.
All right, Joshua, you're now live and able to talk. Do you have audio plugged in?
Yeah, I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So I don't remember if it was Scott or Jason, but your 2020 predictions in Walmart and FedEx and UPS. looking at a massive increase in foot traffic to Walmart to buy toilet paper, and then the massive amount of online shipments that are now being processed through FedEx, giving them a stronger valuation. Do you think that prediction of Walmart acquiring, whether it be FedEx or UPS, are you second guessing your prediction now? Thought I'd have a fun one with that. And then the next thing I was going to share, I want you to answer that question. Then I'm going to share with you, if there's a moment and time for it, what's become of porch pirates. And I have a story to share with you on porch pirates shifting to offices. So it happened today to me at my office, and I wanted to share it. But I wanted to get your 2 cents on your prediction. Or I don't remember which one of you had the prediction, but I think it was Scott.
Yeah, I think that's my prediction. I'm going to hold on that prediction, and this is a good time to bring up. So Amazon announced in the midst of all these layoffs and closures that they're going to add 100,000 associates, and they weren't really clear. I have good visibility into a lot of what's going on with their drivers. A lot of those are going to be drivers. Here in North Carolina alone, they're going to add over 2,000 drivers. So, and I'm seeing my Prime windows being pushed out. So earlier I said Prime Now, which is a different delivery network. Many times it's the Flex delivery network. The one where they've effectively outsourced it to 1099 folks, the what are they called? Delivery DSPs. Yeah. Delivery service providers. They're adding massive numbers of drivers. So my theory is that's going to really improve because they've gone to 1 day Prime and they've got this massive network. Walmart is not going to be able to keep up with that. They're going to go to FedEx or UPS and say, we need you to invest to be able to, so we can keep up with Amazon. They're going to say no, and then Walmart's going to have to buy them to be able to ultimately catch up. Now, will it happen this year? I'm probably too early on this. This is the curse of these predictions, as we're always a little early. But that's, I think I still think the chessboard is set up for that. And we'll have to see.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in a holding pattern.
No, I'm sticking to my prediction.
Hey, but Joshua, more importantly, unlike Scott, I have the password to the website where we print the predictions. And so you may find that I accurately predicted the COVID-19 virus, but I'm
no retconning.
All right, so I'll tell you the fun story. I say fun, but it had me sketchy for half a second. From my main conference room, it's a fishbowl, and right to the front door of the office is a glass door, and this sketchy-looking lady, and I say sketchy. You've ever watched the Ring videos of people coming up and pushing the ring to see if you're home, and they've got their hoodie on and that whole chestnut?
Yeah,
it was that person, definitely that person. And so, unbeknownst to her, I was actually sitting in the glass bowl conference room. She didn't see me. I was having lunch watching VAT-19 videos. It was a good time. And I got up from my chair and went to the door to talk to her. And I was like, hi, how can I help you? And I opened the glass door, and she was kind of off put because she didn't know that I was there, and said, Instacart. And I was like, okay. Okay. What suite number are you looking for? And she goes, and I'm on the second floor. 220. And I was like, okay, well, I occupy the entire second floor and there is no 220. Are you sure you have the right building? This is 160 North Riverview. And she said, no, it must be 180. And I was like, okay, well, have a great day. And then I closed the door, and she ended up walking straight into like the bathroom nearby. Went back, started watching my VAT-19 videos, finished my In-N-Out burgers, and oh my gosh, it dawned on me, lightning struck my brain, and I realized she didn't have any bags. She had nothing on her at all whatsoever other than her hood over her head, to the degree that she was trying to conceal to some degree her identity. And it dawned on me, that's what's going to become, or at least this is what I'm predicting, that's what's going to become of the porch pirates, because they know we're all at home now.
Yeah, so they're waiting at the offices.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, Ring has kind of made it pretty hard to be a porch pirate, haven't they?
Sure has. Anyway, that was my fun story about porch pirates.
Nice, good job thwarting her.
Yeah, I'll tell you some other tips and tricks though. I used I YouTubed ASMR crowd noises. I found a 10-hour video of people talking, so I threw that on a Bluetooth speaker around the corner to make it sound like there were people in the office. Doorbell broken. Please call receptionist at this phone number. I tried to do anything I could to make it appear as if people were there, because I'm probably not going to go back to the office for the rest of the week.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy to, I wonder if she was just going to come in and just steal some monitors or look for something high value or what was up.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. But for sure, it's the case that sad events like this trigger, a ton of scammers. And so there's just so many ways in which we're seeing the absolute worst in humanity, in these sorts of circumstances. And for your point that, people recognizing that, hey, a bunch of us aren't going to be going back to our offices for the foreseeable future, like there probably is an increase in burglary and porch piracy for those less monitored offices, which totally sucks.
Yeah.
Another kind of bad story, and it's always Amazon and eBay sellers, which is always frustrating as the guy that tries to be out there, cheering those people on.
Yeah.
So we have the hand sanitizer guy in the New York Times, right? So we had, what was it, 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. I always wonder, like, why would he do that interview? Like, come on,
out very well for him.
Come on and take a picture. Let me show you my 8,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. What was he thinking on that one? I don't know.
Yeah, but Twitter tracked him down.
They did, yeah, and he had to give it away because he got blocked on all the platforms. So exactly. I guess the trust and safety kind of element kicked in. Yeah. Cool. Thanks,
Last
Josh.
note, I think you guys should do this live video all the time. It's great to see you guys.
Thanks so much for joining, Joshua. That's awesome, and thanks for your question.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
Jason says we have faces for radio, so there you go. Cool. I think Jamie wanted to hop on. Let's see what he has to say.
All right, Jamie, you are now, your mic is muted, but you're able to talk.
In other words, you have to unmute your mic.
Yeah, he may not have been prepared for.
He's shy.
Yeah.
Paige and Jamie.
Anyone else? When we go back to Jamie?
So Adam had a question. Let's hop back to Adam while Jamie figures out his equipment there.
Okay. Adam, you're live again.
Hey guys, happy to go back to Jamie whenever, but I had asked about, or I put it in the chat, is this an opportunity for some of the legacy brands that, we're traditionally buying in store, but maybe not necessarily buying through their websites to connect directly with customers and better compete with some of the DTC brands? So thinking about Nike or Brooks Brothers or Procter & Gamble, and maybe they're coming up with new strategies right now as we speak.
Yeah. So imagine your brand, and I went through those store closures, right? And you really don't have a web presence of your own other than, here's the stores that I will, what I would call where to buy kind of a thing. So you don't have any direct channel. A lot of the sporting goods companies would fall into this category, or like at the hardware companies or something like that. And then all your stores close. So I think it'll amplify this kind of, this desire to go direct to consumer that a lot of the brands have. So I think you're onto something there. It's always scary. It always is nice to be kind of selling through channels because it cuts out a lot of the work you have to do. It's a lot simpler. You don't have to answer questions. You don't have to deal with all the shipping and opening the retail footprint. But when that is shut down, then you have no control over your own destiny. And that's really, really scary in business. So I think you're right. I think it's going to see an acceleration of those trends of brands going direct. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah. I also think it's going to accelerate the investment in going direct for a bunch of brands. Unfortunately, I think one of the ramifications of the pandemic is going to be a greater consolidation of retail and a greater bifurcation of retail. So I think when the dust settles, Walmart and Amazon are going to be big winners, and a bunch of specialty retailers that were already sick are going to be big losers. We're going to see a bunch of people forced into bankruptcy as a result of being forced closed for 2 to 3 months. And I suspect that the total amount of retail square footage is going to be dramatically smaller after this pandemic, like on an order of magnitude of like 20% less square footage for retail in the US than we have right now. So shelf space for those for those products is going to be more limited, and leverage on the part of Walmart and Amazon is going to be greater. And so that puts more importance and impetus on all those direct brands to have a direct path to the consumer and have an alternative channel to wholesale. So I think we'll definitely see that. I also just think there's an element of having your destiny in your own hands. If you're a product that's not a household essential right now, and Amazon starts throttling your ability to get into FBA and their ability to sell your product, because they're focused on the products that are most important to consumers, that's a good move for Amazon to make, but that certainly is bad for you as a seller. And so if all your eggs were in the Amazon basket, you really didn't have control of your own destiny, and you're going to get hit harder by this pandemic than you otherwise would have. And so, I think for all of those reasons, a lot of brands are going to see increased value in making bigger investments in their own direct-to-consumer initiatives.
I guess this is sort of related, but do you think we'll also see some washout of some of the direct-to-consumer brands? I mean, whether it's sort of like the premium meat product that maybe wasn't really a necessity that people just are less apt to buy in this economic environment?
I'm worried about Away because they're in the kind of the crosshairs of travel. So anyone in the travel segment is going to have a really hard time. Another one that's going to have big ripples that's not directly related to your question is Airbnb. So they were having a great year. They had really focused on profitability and were really teed up to do an IPO. And this came at like the worst possible time. So I think there's going to be certain categories like hotel, travel, events, any kind of any brand in the event space. I can't think of any specific DNVBs. Jason, anyone's popped?
No, I think you're right. I think there's categories that are going to really be hurt by this. You mentioned Airbnb. Uber, it's not going to be good for Uber or Lyft either, for that matter. There are going to be categories that are surprising winners, like Blue Apron was on its deathbed, and now its stock is rebounding as a result of all these people ordering food. But I would say even if you're not in a category that's particularly adversely affected, a ton of these direct-to-consumer companies were upside down on their economic model, right? And they're spending a ton on CAC and trying to grow really fast, and the unit economics were really poor. Whatever pile of venture capital cash they were sitting on to execute that strategy, they're now going to burn through that cash way faster for less benefit. And so, like, if you were economically on the bubble, this is likely to wipe you out. Like, even if you're not in a particularly adversely affected category. So I think we'll see some categories get creamed, and we'll see some not super financially sound actors get creamed.
Yeah, this is a good time to work Nicholas's question about supply chain. So, the Chinese supply chain is still totally broken, and the factories there are just starting to get back to work. So, if you were a DNVB that had a Chinese, supply chain, I suspect Casper is. I don't know. I have any data on that. I don't think Allbirds. I bet Warby. I bet parts of Warby's supply chain would be Chinese, like the frames, to get them the price down so low. So I think that's another, that's terrible, because you're probably seeing this surge in demand. It's kind of like the online delivery of groceries, where you have this perfect opportunity to really create a great kind of customer experience. But if your supply chain is all screwed up, then you're going to have a terrible experience. So it'd be interesting to go poke around some of the DNVBs and see. I'm sure probably Webb has done this, the 2 p.m. guy, and see are the shipping times really stretched out. I bet that's happening because the Chinese supply chain is probably shut down.
Yeah, and the other thing I worry about on supply chain is a lot of the supply chains for all the core things that we're totally dependent on is pretty solid and has high capacity right now. So I mentioned the toilet paper earlier. Dairy is another one where there's a ample supply chain to meet all of Americans' needs for dairy. that supply chain's relatively fragile and has numerous single points of failure. So if you want to do some doomsday scenario planning, think about what happens if a major production facility, gets adversely affected by the virus, and a bunch of employees can't come to work, or a bunch of drivers can't drive the truck. There are a number of plausible scenarios that really could put our supply chain in jeopardy. So again, I'd remind everyone, we're not there yet. Like right now, we're in pretty good shape. But this is a scary time to have multiple single points of failure for something as mission critical as that. So with that happy note, should we? I think we have Jamie's audio sorted. If Jamie wants to ask his question.
Hi, good evening, gentlemen.
Welcome to your fourth show, Jamie.
Thank you. It's good to see you guys, and glad to see that you're looking healthy. Hey, my question was about sales and whether or not there've been any published statistics around official increases that retailers are seeing in curbside pickup or click and collect sales, or even home delivery sales with the recent activity with COVID-19.
Yeah, so Nicholas in the notes, I don't know if you can see it, we'll put it in the show notes. He actually shared some BCG data, and it compares overall US to Seattle, which is interesting because Seattle's was one of the first US cities to get hit hard. And it says online grocery is up 9.2% from an index of the time before the crisis, December to January. That's the overall US. And then in Seattle, it's showing 16%. So, there's definitely some data there on the grocery side. And then this is also showing, every category has been hit negatively. So it's showing travel, electronics, department stores. And then the positive ones start at grocery, going into the grocer, mass retail, pharmacy, and then online grocery is the one that's really winning.
Yeah.
Have you seen the other data, Jason?
Yeah. So some of these aggressively shopped categories, we're seeing the category be up 180, 200%. So that's kind of the order of magnitude for some of these peak categories. And I've seen numerous grocers that are seeing 2x overall sales, right? And so you think about there's a lot higher volume of orders, and again, most grocers had a capacity issue, so that there was not unlimited capacity to grow those orders. But we're also seeing much higher AOVs, right? So consumers are putting more, as the hoarding instincts take over, they're putting more expensive stuff in their cart. In the long run, I suspect we're going to see lower consumer confidence and a more value-focused, thrifty consumer be an outcome from this pandemic. But at the moment, consumers are relatively price insensitive while they're sort of panic buying, and so we're seeing some pretty big carts. So it's up substantially.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm wondering whether or not the capacity. Well, I'm pretty sure it is that the lack of capacity is probably throttling some of the growth potential there. Where I think there are a number of retail chains that I've worked with where they were already at capacity in some markets even before COVID-19. So it'll be interesting to see whether this is somewhat of the watershed moment for some of those retail chains where they realize, wow, we've really got to increase our efficiency and our operations and our capacity for click and collect.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would also this is a great time to point out huge props to the retail sales associates and retail operators. People are going to Herculean lengths to keep those flows of orders coming in some adverse conditions. And I'm actually seeing local store managers and regional managers leverage some pretty significant autonomy to do some really clever things to maximize capacity. So we've had a bunch of grocery orders in from a bunch of different retailers, helping a number of my extended family members make sure that they had sort of minimum stocks of things they wanted. And I've seen things Jewel Osco handing off delivery orders to TaskRabbit, who they did not have a formal relationship with and was not a delivery partner. But those guys are just going out individually and hiring TaskRabbiters to deliver for them to extend their own capacity. And that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Necessity is the mother of invention. Cool. Thanks, Jamie, for joining us. It's good to have you. How do you like the live format here?
Oh, this is fantastic. I agree. I think with one of the previous listeners, you should do this much more often.
Awesome. Jason can actually change his background to a Star Wars, to the Millennium Falcon. Boom. Oh, he's at the beach.
Yeah. So that
that's his Chicago view right there.
Yeah, like many people, we had to cancel our spring break, and so I promised my wife that she'd be able to work at the beach this week, and this was the best I could give her. But per Scott's point, my son is much more interested in working for the Millennium Falcon.
Wow, I'm just blown away by the Millennium Falcon there. I'm going to have to catch up with you offline and find out how to make that happen.
Cool. In the Jason, in the chat, we have Hugh Chin. Apologies if I've messed up your name there. And the question is, will the federal state government step in and help out the restaurant owners and gym owners? Many are dying very quickly and will not be able to pay bills. Yeah, this is, so the federal and state governments do not move quickly, but they are all hands on deck for these things. I'm a CNBC junkie, so I've been watching this really closely. The first legislation that passed is around employee law. So for example, if someone loses their job, there's usually a waiting period before they go into unemployment. And then there's this whole thing where there's a back and forth with the employer of where they really employed or whatnot. So they've streamlined that. I think it's called the Families First legislation. This is passed and is out already. So that was the first thing. So the good news there is there's a safety net for as you mentioned, these local businesses are going to really suffer from this. So there's a safety net for the employees. Now they're rolling out a program that I think the name of the next one is called. I don't think it has the coronavirus relief bill. And this one is still being debated, and it's got a lot of bailouts for different industries in there. So there's going to be a lot of discussion around who gets bailed out and who doesn't. And then, unfortunately, I think it is going to be the larger businesses. So it's going to be the Marriotts and the American Airlines and those kinds of businesses that are really impacted. There's talk about cruise lines and should we do that? That's controversial. We won't go into that on the show. But then, one of the nice things about that package is they are talking about, what if you just gave everyone in America, it's kind of like this universal basic income idea because of this huge shock to the system. What if everyone just got $1,000 check? There'd be a means testing there. So if you were in a certain tax category, you would not receive this. But for all these people that are impacted, giving them $1,000 to $2,000 check, there seems to be massive bipartisan support for this, which is a good thing. I'm not a political person, so it's always good when it seems like the government's designed not to do stuff, which is always scary. But then when you do have this kind of obviously we're all facing this one enemy, this virus that we can't see. There does seem to be some bipartisanship and some things going pretty quickly. So that's good. Anything else you want to add there, Jason?
Yeah, just I'm unfortunately pretty pessimistic about the overall impact on this whole pandemic. And so I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that we're going to come out of this pandemic in a recession. And so I think it's very necessary and appropriate and highly likely that there's bipartisan support for a variety of different economic stimulus moves, right? And so I do think the federal government is going to invest in a bunch of ways in trying to goose the economy, which is, probably in everyone's best interest and great. What regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, what tends to suck about these processes is the industries that are likely to get the most help are more likely to be the ones that have the most lobbyists in Washington rather than exclusively based on need, right? And so, just as an absurd example, maybe you don't see an awesome bailout package for independent retailers that in general aren't well represented in Washington. versus the chains, but you see a bailout for the casino industry, which like has a lot more lobbyists, even though it's harder to argue a public benefit to the casinos. But so I'm not sure that the money will be evenly distributed. And I do think the economic impact from this is going to be so extreme that like, I don't think there's going to be any cases where the stimulus makes an industry better off than they would have been otherwise. I think it's just going to lessen the blow that they suffer from some of these effects.
Okay. John Jessup had a question. Can we see if he's got a mic set up?
Yep. Let's
put him on the spot.
John, your mic is turned on. Yep. And you just went off mute. Perfect.
Hey guys.
Hey, John.
How we doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
You got some partners there. Nice.
What's that?
You got some little friends there with you.
Yeah, my daughter and son. We actually we're based in Park City, but last Friday they closed down all the resorts, the schools, everything. It's crazy. So we actually booked it out of there down to Mexico. So I'm actually working out of Cabo for the next month.
That's like, sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Way to suffer.
Yeah, it's bumming. Yeah, for sure. Jason, yeah, sorry about your vacation. That sucks.
I'm in the overall scheme of things. I'm sure it'll work itself out. But thank you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I actually had two questions. So obviously SFP, self-fulfilled prime, is a big deal. Is that all still normal with Amazon?
Yeah, it's so for listeners that aren't kind of spun up on this, so I imagine the reason you're asking the question is Amazon has limited inbound shipments to FBA, and the FBA is where you're actually using Amazon's entire fulfillment center to ship your products. I saw the list, so it's things like groceries, kind of what they're calling essentials. So groceries, toilet paper, all these things that are really hot right now. So if you're selling, like a 6-year-old iPad, they're not going to take that, or electronics or anything like that. So if you sell those things, that's pretty bad, because if you're relying on FBA for your fulfillment, you're pretty much toast. But the good thing is for sellers, there is another option called Seller Fulfilled Prime. And this is where you fulfill it yourself, but you live up to the Prime promise. So you need to say and then you can specify. So this is a good thing. So if you only have an East Coast presence, you can at least still be Prime eligible within a window of East Coast zip codes and areas that you want to ship. So it is still a thing. My understanding is it's still an invite kind of program. Like they're not going to just kind of say, you sell 5 widgets, you're going to be in the program. I think you have to be doing a fair amount of volume and kind of, and then a demonstrable ability to ship at those levels, the Prime levels. And Jason, anything you want to add to that?
I do think it's a problem. I think it's a lesson. Like, I feel like there's 2 kinds of FBA sellers: people that are exclusively leveraging Amazon and people that are more diversified. And like, I think this is a lesson in diversification. But that aside, I think there's a long-term potential that someone goes, man, the Amazon platform is really good for me, but I shouldn't be all my eggs in FBA. And so per Scott's point, maybe I start to investigate and invest in seller fulfilled Prime. I don't think that solves I don't think that's a viable solution in this crisis situation, because I don't know this, but I strongly suspect that Amazon has no bandwidth to be onboarding new vendor fulfilled Prime right now while they're focused in the throes of it.
Yeah, there is another middle ground. So there are some 3PLs, and they're essentially certified to be seller fulfilled Prime. So you can go to this third-party logistics company and your products will still show up to be Prime eligible. A good example of this is FedEx. So they have kind of a ship by FedEx, where FedEx is your 3PL. And then there was a lot of news around the holiday where Amazon kicked them out of seller fulfilled Prime, but they're back in. So that would be an option if you would want to go look at, FedEx has this kind of fulfill by FedEx. I forget the name of it. Is it ship by FedEx? I forget the name of it. Yep. It's all confusing. So that could be an alternative to folks. What was your second question?
Yeah, so the second question obviously was ShopDoc being moved to September. Salesforce Connections is a big event for us. We were planning on spending a lot of money on those events for lead gen. thoughts on how to maybe reallocate that budget for, acquiring new customers?
Yeah. What other lead gen things work for you?
Obviously outbound, digital. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's a new thing we're trying to figure out, how would you allocate, budget? But yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. And your customer is going to be so you're a vendor selling to retailers and brands, right? So you're kind of in the B2B lead gen. You're not like a direct to consumer kind of an offer.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I always have a lot of success with inbound marketing. Inbound marketing. So you put a lot of content out there. I would allocate it into you doing a lot of content and maybe partner with a Forrester or someone in your space that can kind of help you with some third-party thought leadership. You put that out there, and you're not really salesy with it, and it has this kind of magical ability of bringing kind of people to you. I think Jason and I spend all our time on thought leadership, and we're kind of the poster children for this lifestyle, if that's a thing.
This is a lifestyle now?
This is the dream. You're looking at the dream right here.
I love it. Yeah, John,
you could be doing a webinar at 9:00 at night.
Yeah, it is a tough question. My wife is also runs marketing for a vendor in the e-commerce space, and so she's in that same boat. She's had a bunch of her events canceled, and she's trying to figure out how to direct that capital. And I do think Scott's answer is excellent. I do think pivoting to more content marketing does make a lot of sense, because I tend to think of events as being sort of 90% of the value you get from these industry events is top of the funnel value. 10% of the value you get is bottom of the funnel, right? So you go to that shop talk, maybe you have a one-on-one meeting with a hot prospect who's already in market for your product, and you go home with 2 or 3 leads that are pretty far down the sales funnel. And so you have these 3 leads that are worth a lot of money to you that are bottom of the funnel. But the majority of people you're going to interact with and the majority of benefit you're going to get from that event is enhancing your brand awareness and brand trust, so that 6 months from now or 9 months from now, when someone is in market for your service, you're more likely to win. You're more likely to be the first phone call. You're more likely to, survive in the consideration set. And so when I think about marketing tactic, a lot of the traditional digital marketing tactics, paid advertising, is very bottom of the funnel, right? And so when I think about marketing tactics that kind of replace that top of the funnel thing, I do think content marketing is very strong. I am starting to see people have better results with B2B influencer marketing, which is maybe a specific version of content marketing is a way to think of it. But so I do think those are a potential play. Even if these events, the problem with the March event getting canceled and getting postponed to September is, even if the event is awesome in September, from your perspective, you're going to be generating a bunch of leads at the end of the year, that are less likely to have a payoff in this calendar year. And so I do think you want to think about alternatives rather than sitting on that money for late in the year events.
Yeah. I think I'm on the board at ChannelAdvisor, so I don't have a real time view of this, but I made it through 2008, 9/11, and then the .com bubble burst. It's going to be really hard to close deals in the next 3 months because no one's going to take any risk. So I would hunker down and sell stuff to existing customers, more seats, more products. I think it's going to be that kind of a world. So it's probably okay. You don't, what would have been really bad is if you had spent all that money and gotten some leads, and then this virus hit, and then you'd spent all the money and there's no way to get these guys to your pipeline. So I think it's gonna be a hunker down period is kind of what I feel.
That's awesome. Thank you guys. That's awesome.
Thanks. So I see Scott Silverman's on. Let's just kind of he's a friend of the show, so let's just poke over there and see if he'll answer if his mic's on.
Okay, all right, Scott, your mic is turned on, although you're muted at the moment if you weren't expecting us to call on you.
You may need to go into settings and give your computer permission.
I feel like it looks like you just got it working.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason and Scott. How are you guys doing?
Good. So, listeners, we have a celebrity. Scott Silverman was one of the original Shop.org guys, and he coined the phrase Cyber Monday. So this is like having e-commerce royalty on the show. It's really, really good to have you, Scott.
I don't know if I would say that, but
he's also
nice
humble
to see
too.
you guys, and thanks for doing this. I was just sitting here lurking, so there could be like children coming in and interrupting in any moment. So just
That's
need
the
to
new normal,
give
my
you
friend.
fair warning of that.
That's part of the program. Bring them in. Do you have any burning questions? How about you do a lot of event organizing. I imagine this has been really chaotic for your world, right?
Yeah, I'm learning a lot about force majeure and impossibility clauses, thinking about all those things. My Commerce Next business was scheduled to do a party at Shop Talk, so we have rescheduled that to September, and just closely watching the news, trying to see what the duration of all of this is. That's the big question I'm thinking about right now in terms of the business.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it's impossible to know. I feel like with 9/11, we kind of knew pretty quickly what was going on, and we got through that very quickly. With 2008, it was kind of a slow boil, and then once we had that fallover moment, then we kind of knew we were going to come out of it with the TARP program and things like that. This one, when there's the cone of uncertainty is just huge. We don't know how long, how deep this is going to last, and it's really makes it very hard to, as an entrepreneur and anyone in business, to kind of know what's going to happen. So I feel your pain. How about, I know you do a lot around the cross-border trade and global. Has that kind of frozen up in this environment, or are we still seeing a fair amount of cross-border trade going on?
We had our cross-border event on February 13th when this was all starting, and there was still a lot of energy around that topic. We're seeing continued interest on the cross-border vendors, just like the previous question that came in about lead generation. So it seems like I would assume that they are having some productive phone calls or conversations. I haven't really heard from any retailers specifically about their cross-border shopping, so I don't really have anything to contribute on that. What I can tell you is I actually was able to squeeze in a couple roundtable dinners last week before everything essentially shut down in LA and San Francisco, and it was a very interesting time. The dinners were intended to be on some specific topics, but everything turned into coronavirus and impact and adjustments. This was, things are changing so quickly, but just last week, the consensus was that this actually could be fairly, not positive, but they were seeing increases in sales. The people that were selling on Amazon were seeing more sales. People were attributing this to work from home and people having more time on their hands. But I think if we were to ask all those people again, 1 week from that conversation we had, it would probably be very different.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'm amazed you got there and home. So that congrats on surviving the travel craziness.
Yeah, empty planes.
Yeah, it's kind of freaky. Cool. Thanks for joining us, Scott. We really appreciate it. Let's see. Thanks. We appreciate it. Come on, Melissa. I think we.
So sadly, Scott, I think she just dropped. I don't know if it was a technical problem or a problem with her mic, but I just opened up her mic, and a second after that she dropped. So maybe she'll bounce back in here in a second, or maybe we just went too long for her.
Could be. Speaking of going long, we're a little bit past our hour. Do you want to go ahead and wrap this thing?
Yeah. I hesitate to even say that we've gone long and used up all our allotted time because it's so awesome that so many of you are willing to come in and join us live with the show. We'll definitely do this again. I suspect it's a slight advantage that we're all sitting at home with less to do than we normally did. But really appreciate everyone's support of the show and joining live. And if you want to do us one other favor as we hang up, go jump on and give us a fresh review on iTunes. And I know it's a royal pain in the neck because oddly, iTunes only lets you write reviews from the app. So if you go to jasonandscott.com, there'll be a link right there to go to iTunes. It'll open up our show in your app, and then you can write us a quick review. And that's really the way you can reward us for the time we invest in the show. But super grateful for your support, and thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everybody. And
until next time, happy e-commercing.
You've been listening to The Jason and Scot Show. For all the latest news and trends on e-commerce and shopper marketing, subscribe to us in iTunes or visit www.jasonandscott.com.